Okay, this video is going to be about the taxes owed from the city to the school district. Let me share my screen. Okay, so City of Mount Vernon City School District, the complex make whole tax issue explained. I'll do my best to explain it. These are complicated issues, but I think it's better to address complex issues by attending closely to actual facts and data rather than just making stuff up, which people tend to do. What inspired me to make this is really three things. One was this slide from Dr. Strickland's presentation about the coming year's budget. This is really striking. This shows from 2016 through last year, 7 of the 10 years, Mount Vernon City Schools had a 0% local property tax levy. That stands in stark contrast to people around us. What this gave the illusion is that the costs in the school district were not going up. Really, it is an illusion because what happened was the school district burned through its savings. It decimated its tax reserve. Its fiscal reserves. So that led to that crisis last year, where taxes were raised by 3.3% and three schools were closed. That people have asked, where did that money go? That money went to fill deficits. The school district had built up a lot of deficits. It had spent money that it didn't have, and that's really where that money went. It's interesting right now. I'm hearing a lot of people complain about this 1.99% tax increase. Those same people who are complaining didn't say anything about last year's 3.3% tax increase. In fact, I didn't hear them talking at all about, the line now seems to be that, oh, if the city made us whole for past taxes, we wouldn't have to raise taxes. I didn't hear that being floated around last year, which is curious. It makes me think that there are other motivations. So this is one thing. Also, one thing you notice here is that obviously our tax rate went up a relatively small amount compared to neighboring districts. We also shot up to the top of the fiscal stress list. We ended up getting a fiscal monitor because we had to borrow against future foundation aid. It's called a spin up. So not only did we close schools and have to raise taxes, but we had to borrow against future state aid tax revenue. That's how dire the situation was in. If you don't see the connection between this and that problem, obviously there are other problems, but this is clearly one of them. A better way to have done things here is manage your property tax increases systematically, slowly. Work within the tax cap every year. Don't spend down your reserves, especially in a district like ours, which has an aging infrastructure. So this was one of the things. There were two other things that made me want to do this. And before I go any further, let me just say this. I'm presenting here as a resident. I am on the board of ed, but I'm not going to present any information that only I would know. This is just information that I have gleaned because I try to be civically engaged. I read widely, I watch things, and I make a lot of videos to try and help me understand what's going on. I share videos, I share various things I analyze with the public because that's part of my idea of learning. And I figure I can share it with other people, and hopefully they will learn something as well. I'm not representing myself here as a trustee of the school board. I'm just a resident who lives in the city. So yeah, this slide from Dr. Strickland's presentation. Two other things. There's a campaign video that's being floated by a couple of people who are running to be on the school board, who are running on a vote down the superintendent's proposed 1.99 tax levy. That strikes me as odd that you would have people campaigning against what the superintendent and the current school board who have knowledge about these things are suggesting we do. They seem to be saying that the only reason we're doing this is because the city hasn't made us whole for prior tax years. But again, I would point to the fact that none of them were out saying this last year, um, around this 3.3% tax increase. Didn't hear it from any of them. It's also just deeply ignorant. One of these candidates, I said to him, I sent him a through social media, which I'm about to leave, as you know, or maybe you don't know, but I sent him links to the budget. There's a 115-page budget book. We're required to share lots of information with the community about a budget. He said he didn't need to read it because he knows what's going on in my city. That's just astonishingly ignorant, and quite frankly, childish. The third thing was I was at a presentation Dr. Strickland gave the other night at Denzel, Washington, and he was talking about this issue and how the school district had come to terms on about $5.4 million owed for fiscal 21 and 22. And this neighbor of mine, a guy I know, yelled out, "How about 30 million?" And so I approached him during a break and said, "Where did you get that 30 million from?" And he said, "Oh, when I was running for city council last year, I heard somebody say that." Um, that's, I don't know, that seems like a bad way to fix your belief. I told him that's not true. I don't know what the total amount is because, every year the tax rule, it gets added based on what wasn't paid. But it's not 30. It'll never be. I mean, I guess it could potentially get to 30, but I doubt it'll ever get to 30. We'll look at some of the exposure now. Maybe it will be 20 million once we fold in 25 and 26, but that won't be till 28. So it's really, really hard to predict. The amount now is far less than that. So those were the three things. These facts here over the last 10 years, the candidates who are incredibly misguided in writing and running against what is a very reasonable budget when you consider all the factors. And my neighbor, who also seemed to be misguided by yelling $30 million out. Okay, I'm going to move quickly. And again, these are complicated topics. I don't want this to go on forever, but I want to lay it out a bit for you. There are important key terms: local property tax levy. I'm not going to read these slides. I'm going to put it out there. If you want to pause and then read through it, you can do that. Key information from this slide is that 53% of the budget for next year will come from local property taxes. That's important because that's a big chunk of money. So when people don't pay their taxes, that can have a real impact on your ability to operate. The other thing I just want to point here, I'll talk about things in terms of the end date fiscal year. So fiscal year 26 is July 1, 25 to June 30th, 26. That's kind of a convention used in accounting. You talk about it on the last day. So fiscal 26 is this year, next year's fiscal 27. As far as school taxes, they're paid in two installments, 50% each. First one in July, second one in January. So for example, for this fiscal year, installment one was due in July 2025. Installment two is due in January 2026. More key concepts. This is right from the real property tax law. This gets more into the meat of the city's obligation to the school district for unpaid taxes. The reason why the city has an obligation is because the school district is limited in terms of its leverage to get people to pay their taxes. We can tack on interest. We can send them, increasingly threatening letters, but we don't have the power to start an in-rem process and threaten foreclosure and ultimately take their property. The city is the one who enforces that. That's why it's kicked over to the city after a collection period. Just in technical terms, you'll hear tax warrant. That's just your tax bill. That's the actual document that authorizes tax collection. It's called a tax warrant. This statement of unpaid taxes, this happens after the fiscal year. So, or after the two pieces of taxes are collected. So in February of each year, there's a statement of unpaid taxes, and that is what we send to the city. The school district sends to the city saying, here are the tax warrants that weren't paid for the current year. That once that is certified, those unpaid warrants that's certified, that starts a 2-year collection period. There have been problems with getting that tight in 2 years. It's extended for a lot longer, as you'll see. The city controller or his designee is the enforcement officer. That's someone in the finance department. The controller in the finance department or the assistant superintendent for business administration in the school district, they appoint someone who's going to be the tax collector. Yeah, this is the monthly payover. Every month, any of the taxes that are unpaid taxes that are collected by the city during that 2-year period, or even before that, sometimes people are still doing that. It's sent over to the school district. The city is allowed to tack on 5% interest for their efforts, I guess. More terms. This is the important one. This is that make whole provision in the law. So at 2 years after that certification date, that February date, or thereabouts, it changes. It's changed every year if you look back over time. Taxes that are not paid, that starts this period of collection. After the 2 years ends, that's when the city has got to make the school district whole. What's happened is, because of the amounts have been so large and the city's finances are in such bad shape, it hasn't been a lump sum payment. Instead, there's been an agreement to pay over time, monthly installments, for amounts that were due up to and including fiscal year 2020. Those payments just finished in September. They settled that. It was somewhere around $12 million. They settled that amount. So look, the sequence of the sequence of events, the period of the tax warrant, that's within the school year. School district collects in 2 installments in July and January. Around February 20th, or maybe in June or July, at some point after that January deadline, without waiting too long, it's certified. The unpaid taxes are certified. That certified document is sent to the city. That starts the 2-year collection period. And that 2-year period, the district, the city works on collecting that, and they make payments to the district every month for what they collect, and the school district also helps out in collecting that. So both the city and the school district are trying to collect that. At the end of the 2 years, the final tax warrant that will be due after that 2-year collection period is whatever that certified amount was at the beginning of the 2-year minus what was collected in tax and interest by the city and the school district during the 2 years. That will yield that final number. That final number then is certified. That becomes the basis for a contract for the city to pay the school district over time. I jumped ahead. That's what I just explained there. So I hear the notice historically, city hasn't had the money to make a lump sum payment, so there's been an agreement with the school district. Quickly, I want to just walk through, just to give people an idea of how complicated this can be. Keeping things simple, let's say that the total tax levy is $200. There are 100 property taxpayers. Everyone pays the same amount. Obviously, one thing that makes it more complicated is it's far more than $200. There are far more than 100 properties, and there's a wide variety of amounts due. Some people owe a lot. Some people owe a little bit. It's based on their assessment. People challenge their assessments. The numbers change over time. So all of that complicates this a lot more, but the principles are the same. So each taxpayer bill is $2, and it's collected through a warrant for half in July and half in January. Tax arrears, that's the delinquents, the people don't pay their taxes. Let's say, for example, that there was $1 due in July from 100 people. Let's say 10% or 10 property taxpayers did not pay that first installment, right? So in terms of district cash flow, 100 was due, only 90 was collected. The district needs money to operate. So when people don't pay that taxes, it potentially can hurt the ability of the district to operate. Let's say they didn't pay in July. So let's say by December, 7 of those 10 people paid their July due, okay? And 3 people remain in arrears at that point, right? So now at this point, we've got 97 out of 100 property taxpayer pay their July. So 3% are outstanding. Here's just another note. If someone doesn't pay their taxes, then by 60 days after the end of the fiscal year, that's no longer a tax receivable and now becomes deferred revenue. And that changes the picture of it a bit. And this is where, people who are screaming that, the money should be used exclusively to plug the hole in your operating budget for a fiscal year, you have to think more carefully about that. Deferred revenue rules, I don't know what they are entirely, but I know that it has implications for whether or not the money goes into your operating budget. And again, note that didn't happen last year, right? We took a 3.3%. There was no mention of using the deferred revenues. What, 5 million plus flowed in from the city from the money from 2020. It was not used in that way. It was really used to fill deficits that exist, right? And if you listen to Superintendent Strickland, he's still doing that. He's still filling holes that were left from prior administrations. So he's still doing that. But maybe some of the deferred revenue from years past can go into subsequent tax years to reduce the levy on taxpayers. But I think you have to be really careful about that because you have to really be dependent on the city for that. If the city's not dependable and you build a budget that includes revenue coming in from the city, then you're going to get caught in a difficult spot. But I made the point at the special meeting on May 12th that we need to consult with our external auditors about that. They'll know more about that. So let's say the January installment comes, second half of payment. Let's say the 3 taxpayers in arrear from the first installment remain in arrear. So they didn't pay their July, they didn't pay their January. And in addition to that, 10 more people don't pay their second half. They paid their first half, but they don't pay their second half. So in terms of collections, for July, we collected $97 of the $100 that was due in the first half, plus interest. I'm not going to get into the interest piece. In January, the installment we collect $87, right? The 3 people who didn't pay in July also didn't pay in January. Plus, there's 10 more people who didn't pay. So that means for the total tax levy for the fiscal year, $200. At this point, right, we've collected 184 plus whatever interest is involved. Next, we get to that statement of unpaid taxes, right? I'll use February 20th, although you'll see how later on I'll talk about when these taxes were certified in prior years. But let's just say that statement of unpaid taxes comes along. Let's say at that point, right, from January 31st to February 20th, some more money has come in. And let's say now there's two taxpayers who are property owners who have paid zero. They didn't pay anything for July, they didn't pay anything for January. And let's say there's 3 taxpayers who paid July, but they didn't pay January. So they paid 50%. Okay. So here shows there's 2 people who haven't paid any of their taxes. They didn't pay in July or January. And here's 3 people who paid part. They paid half. They paid July, but they didn't pay January. So in terms of collection, now it looks like this. July installment, we collected 98 out of $100, 2% unpaid. And January installment, as of February 20th, $95, 5% unpaid. So when you add that together, again, excluding interest, you've collected 193 out of $200. That's a unpaid tax warrants of 3.5%. Okay, that's what we're going to certify to the city. So now that 2-year enforcement period begins for that 3.5% of unpaid tax warrants. Plus, remember, the city can add 5% interest onto that for their efforts. And what we have is the city and the school district, A and B, are both trying to collect that money. When the city collects it, they send it over to the school district, right? That's what's going on in that 2-year period. At the end of the 2-year period, you take the total amount, that 3.5%, you subtract whatever taxes and interest were collected by the city and the school district from that 3.5%. And that final number is what the city owns. That's the number. That's the basis of your contract between the city and the school district to make the school district whole for past taxes. Let's talk a little bit about the problems and complicating factors, because I think it's important. One, remember we had the big issues with the prior comptroller Reynolds. You can go and look up, it's discussed pretty thoroughly in the Office of State Comptroller audits. They were issued in 2020 and I think 2022. Really created a complicated mess because she was not, remember back then, the city collected the school taxes. She was not remitting those taxes over to the school district. In addition, some people weren't able to pay their taxes. She wasn't even collecting them from people. My neighbor said, "Hey, I try to pay my taxes and the controller won't take the money." So that created a huge problem for the city and the school district, and it created confusion among taxpayers. So in 2020, the school district decides to say, "Hey, listen, we're done with this. We're going to collect our own taxes going forward." This, of course, continued to add to the confusion. Some taxpayers continued to pay the city. Some were paying to pay their school district taxes to the city, or were trying to. Some were paying it to the school district. Again, this is just creates confusion with your tax warrants across so many properties with a variety of assessments, and you'll see their systems are not great. Which three, you have procedural variations. So your standard operating procedures in your accounting departments in both the city and the school district were wanting, right? There were not good codified systems in both places. And that creates more problems in terms of pinning down these warrants, certifying those numbers. Here are just some examples. Partial payments. If you're allowing people to make partial payments against those installments. For example, in July, the property tax owner owes $1. They say they don't have $1. They can only pay you 80 cents. And you say yes to that and you let them pay that 80 cents. Well, your accounting system better be really good in getting that, in accounting for that. And that has implications on any interest that is owed. So your systems have to be really good to accommodate that. Cash payments. Some people try and pay their taxes with cash. So you combine partial payments and cash payments, and you're just setting yourself up for complications and challenges. And again, this applies to on both the city side and the school district side. And then how about communication between the municipalities? If your accounting system in the city is different from your accounting system in the school district, when the city is looking to make monthly payments over to the school district, that can have impacts if the systems aren't communicating with each other. That might force you to do it outside of your system. Again, another complicating factor. And then four, what I'll term suboptimal cooperation and communication between the city and the school district. Under the best of circumstances where everybody was getting along interpersonally and professionally, this is a challenging problem. But there are many times where you can see open conflict, hostility between people who work for the school district and who are on the school board and people who work for the city and who are elected officials in the city. That lack of communication, that suboptimal communication and cooperation just complicates things. It makes it even harder. Some other complicating factors on the school district side. July 1, you have a new superintendent that starts. That's a factor. You have a New York State monitor who starts July 1, placing demands on the systems and the structures within the school district. That's a complicating factor. July 1, your assistant superintendent for business resigns. Jose Formosa leaves the school district July 1. So at that point, you have no permanent treasurer. You have no assistant superintendent for business. These were critical personnel who were managing these unpaid tax warrant issues. These are all complicating factors that will lead to delay. That's just simply a fact about that. So in September, the city completed payments to make the school district whole for amounts owed up to and including fiscal year 2020. So we need a new agreement for fiscal 21 to 23. The collection period for 2024 will end in October of this year. The collection period for fiscal year 2025 will end in May 2027. This, again, these dates here, October and May, that's based on the date in which those years were certified. So fiscal 2024 was certified October of 2024, right? Fiscal 2025 was certified in May of 2025, okay? Fiscal 2026 will look to have it certified right at 2 years, which will be in July of 2028. So we need a new agreement, and those are the timelines. I'll just leave that there. I didn't set it up. More historical context. So October 2025, remember Formosa left in July, new superintendent, new school monitor. So no permanent head of the business department, no permanent treasurer, another key role in the business department. So in October, the superintendent is able to hire a new assistant superintendent for business. By January, that's in October, by January, that assistant superintendent for business has resigned. So that guy comes and goes. So when that time where we would have been looking to pin that down gets delayed, a retired superintendent is brought in, Valente. He was the superintendent, I believe, in Tuckahoe, as an interim assistant superintendent for business. January, we hire an excellent district treasurer. Joe Lynn is hired. So now we're bringing some stability there and some consistency there. So by May, you can go watch a special meeting. The city controller and our corporate counsel. I made a few words as a school board trustee who's been involved in these issues. We talk about it in that meeting. Fiscal year 21 and 22, what's owed is about 5.4 million. Fiscal year 23, 3 million. Fiscal year 24, approximately 4 million. We're pinning this down. So, and then fiscal 25 and 26, we don't know. The collection periods are still underway. So you have to make a guesstimate of what, conservatively for the city, or maybe aggressively from the school district, what will be owed. We'd rather, of course, collect it before then, right? Anything we can collect before then is good, is money that's coming in sooner rather than later. But as it stands now, fiscal year 21 through 24, it looks like it's about 12.4 million. That's what we will be striking an agreement for, or we'll get an agreement for this, and then we'll fold in 23 and 24, but the key is to get that cash flowing again. And then fiscal year 25 and 26, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 million. So it could be, let's say it's going to be 15 to 20 million. Okay, that's what it'll be. That's a guess. Maybe it'll be less than that, but it's probably not going to be more than that. And every year when people don't pay their taxes, we have to go through this process. Hopefully, now that the city is doing an in-rem process, the numbers will go down. How long will it take the city to make the school district whole? I don't know. Right now, they're working on what is a monthly payment that is a carrying amount that the city can maintain. And as I mentioned before, we have to pin down, as that money comes in, as that deferred revenue gets applied, how much, if any of it, can be applied to a current year levy, as opposed to going into your reserves. There are limits on how high the reserves can get. 4% is 4% of your, I'm not sure what it is. I think it's 4% of your budget can go into the reserves. There are different buckets within your reserves that have restrictions. Maybe the money will go into capital repairs. The bottom line is, we have plenty of need, but it's a bad idea. You want your reserves to be at 4%. You don't want them to be spent, because that gives you a cushion if something happens. And when let me stop this. And when you have a lot of old buildings with a lot of repairs, you need to have some funds in case you have emergency repairs that are costly. So that is, I think, a more accurate picture of what's going on than what you're hearing floated around. I hope that helps. Thank you. Bye.